And just while people are taking a seat, I just want to say there's quite a number of people that would have loved to have been here today that had previously committed engagements for today. But we have good wishes, in particular from Professor Sarah Moore, who's chair of Ireland's National Forum for Enhancement of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. So she's watching the proceedings today, and I just want you to tell your friends out there that this entire conference is being live streamed today on YouTube. It's been live streamed on the INUI Galway YouTube. So even though people can't be here, they may be able to catch some of it at home. And Cormac, I think I'm saying, Cormac, that is going to be stored there, isn't it?
The conference office.
Through the conference office. Okay, very good. I also want to use this opportunity to just mention a new publication of Education Matters, which is due to be launched on Tuesday night. And Education Matters is for sale today at a special reduced price for our conference delegates. I think it's €10. If not, I'm sure they'll let you know, but I do believe it's €10. And it's an incredibly impressive volume. It's edited by Dr. Tony Hall, who's here, resident in UIG. But the two people behind this is Phyllis Mitchell, who's doing this now, I understand, for 28 years. And it's a treasure trove of articles and key issues and key names in the education field. So it's well worth looking at. And to be fair to Phyllis Mitchell and Caroline Duggan, who is a new Masters in Journalism student as of last week, just graduated from here, they have given incredible support to me in putting this conference together, as has Stefano Coulon, who is also on the board of Education Matters. So I can't say enough of good things about the goodwill and the intention of the people behind Education Matters. So I would recommend that you take a look at it when you're out there for lunch. Lunch is 12:30 to 1. Thank you for coming back on time. And also on their table, sorry, 12:30 to 2, Gamalishkin. I know. I know, I'm noted for working people hard, but actually, like the Finnish system, I do believe in breaks. I believe in relaxing, I believe in play, because it's through those moments and that space that we learn more, because we network more and we collaborate more. But also on the table, the Education Matters table, there's a flyer on Pasi Salberg's new book, Finnish Lessons. So please take that as well when you're out there. Now, it's my great pleasure to say to you what an impressive panel we have here for the business discussion panel. And I'm going to introduce to you the chair of this panel, who is Michael Hannon, who is the academic registrar in GMIT since September 2010. Prior to this, he was the assistant registrar there and the head of the department at the GMIT Letterfrack campus, lecturer, and previous to that, post-primary teacher. I first met Michael when he was the department head in Letterfrack. And you know that they provide really interesting courses around furniture design, and the students they attract are often students with learning difficulties, and particularly specific learning difficulties like dyslexia. But as we know, that student, once they overcome the difficulty, their creativity and their lateral thinking is quite incredible. And GMIT has been overwhelmingly successful at capturing that niche, and they've turned out world leaders in this area. I know a student that's a graduate from there, he's been commissioned for his furniture all over the world. His name escapes me just now. But nationally, Michael is a member of the Institutes of Technology Ireland. He's currently one of the 7 national Bologna experts. He has widespread quality assurance experience. His educational philosophy places the student at the centre of the learning experience, and a philosophy he practiced himself in his own teaching career. He's currently pursuing a doctorate in higher education with the University of Bath. But I suppose if I were to sum up Michael in 2 words, committed and caring. I give you Michael Hannon.
Thank you very much, Fidelma. I'm not so sure about not working people hard when you're asked to chair a panel with 7 members in 50 minutes, but let's see how we go. We'll do our best. We're here today looking at the relationship between business and education and the engagement with business and education. And I'm going to first of all just introduce the panel to you. On my left is Barbara Nolan. On her left is Alan Monge. Then we have Sean Cottrell. Then we have Tony Donoghue. Then we have Emer Mulligan. Then we have Colin McDowd. And at the end we have John Power. So before we start, I'd like to give a warm welcome to the panel for being here today and for engaging with us. The approach I plan to take during this session is that the panel have submitted suggestions and areas of interest at the pre-conference stage to me as chair, and I've collated those comments into generic questions that capture most of the issues that they have raised, and if I haven't done them justice, they'll have a chance to address that as we go. So I propose to go with a question to the panel, one generic question, they can pick up on it. And then at the end of that question session, we'll get some, hopefully at least one question from the audience before we go on to the next question. We'll keep going in that manner until we exhaust the list of questions I have here, which will probably, the time will come in on us first, I expect. Okay, so to start, the first question I have really is, from an employer's perspective, how well prepared are our graduates to enter the workplace? Is our education system fit for a purpose? We hear a lot of talk that employers give generic skills, that employers value generic skills, maybe even more so than the discipline-specific skills. And a number of the panel members have made reference to this in their contributions at pre-conference stage. From a higher education perspective, and I am wearing a higher education perspective with my own background here, I would argue that we in higher education do facilitate the acquisition of the generic skills in our graduates. But I'm interested to throw that open now to the panel to see to what extent are generic skills covered, or are they covered adequately from an education perspective and from an employer's perspective. So, without volunteering somebody, we'll see who volunteers first. Sean, did you want to go in?
Okay, well, seeing as you...
If we use the mics as well. Okay, thanks.
Seeing as you give me the spotlight, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello? Dave, sorry. I'll try wait for a moment.
It's on now. It's on.
Hello?
It's on.
Two.
Hello? Okay, I'll try and get as loud as possible. I'm obviously not an employer in the third level sector or in the third level sector for that matter, but in a conversation that I had recently with Louise Phelan from PayPal, she talked about the difficulties that they have finding people not just coming in as with generic skills, but basic skills such as spelling, such as being able to write a letter of application, fill out a form, and when put in a room of other applicants to do some group work and to follow some instructions to see are these people able to actually do more than what their CV simply says. They found that 30% of the people that actually came through their application process weren't cutting the mustard, and she was questioning why is it that highly qualified graduates with lots of technical skills and abilities aren't actually able to do that basic thing of putting themselves forward in a professional way.
Okay, that's fine. Tony, you wanted to come in? Thanks. Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, I actually don't think they are, because they're not embedded in the curriculum at third level. We might see some evidence in them in the more vocational orientated subjects, but academics, particularly those in arts, humanities and social sciences, don't really agree, I think. I think there's an intellectual argument here. I think, and it was touched on in the earlier session by Kevin Donoghue when he was saying it's not the job of universities or institutes of technology to produce good-to-go graduates. I quite agree, but I suppose my central thesis on this is that there is absolutely no dichotomy between educational values and what business is requiring, despite the sort of debates that we hear. Are we educating people for a society or for an economy, which I think is a fairly sterile debate. And if I was to look for support on this, I go to an educationalist, Howard Gardner, who'd be very well known in this audience and made his name in the 80s talking about multiple intelligences. He wrote a book about 3 or 4 years ago called 5 Minds for the Future, which was actually directed at business leaders. And he suggested that the types of minds that business are looking for, and these are the generic skills, incidentally. Generic skills is a very inelegant word, as is employability skills. It's very limiting. He talks about the disciplined mind, and that's discipline in both senses, master or mistress of a discipline, whether that's astrophysics or carpentry. Also a mind that can manage information. He talks about the creative mind. He talks about the synergizing mind, which touches on interdisciplinary teaching. He talks about the respectful mind, and he talks about the ethical mind. These are the things that business values and should be embedded, whether it's medieval history or applied engineering. And I think the Academy has a responsibility to give its graduates the language that employers could understand around this, because I see no conflict with educational values.
Thank you very much, Sean. Eamon?
Okay, just to give the university perspective, or I should say probably particularly the business school perspective, I would have to disagree somewhat with my colleague, surprisingly, beside me, in that we certainly put a huge value internally in the business school on exactly these kind of skills you're talking about. We call them transferable skills, so that whatever environment you're in and you're moving into, you bring these with you and they're necessary. But we did find through, no matter how much engagement we did with employers, etc., and with the students and telling them about the benefit of it, it really only gets serious traction when we give the students the currency they best understand, which is we give them credits for it. And that is so over the last about 3 years, we've embedded it in a module. In fact, we have a module in every year of our undergraduate business programs across the full suite of our programs that cover exactly this kind of skill set. It didn't go down very well initially because they couldn't see the value. It was only when they come out the other end of the tree, as is often the case with many students, that they see the value of what we were doing. But because we attached credits to it, they had to do it, if you like, they had to buy in. The other thing we do, and I can't say this happens across every university, but the other thing we do is we bring now a lot of people from industry in to work with us as mentors, and they work directly with the students. Now that does two things. It helps our students, but it equally helps the employers to understand better what we have to deal with, if you like, in terms of what stage our students are at, how they see themselves going out into business. And it's only when the two work together, because I believe fundamentally it's all about collaboration. Because we all are entrenched, we all have our views, we all come from some perspective, but it's only when you understand the other perspective that you'll get best results. So the mentoring has also worked. The third thing we've introduced, and then I'll pass on to another colleague, is the whole area of internationalization. And we now try to give every student that comes into the business school an opportunity to go abroad. Now you might say, that's fantastic, and I'm sure they all do it. Believe it or not, the biggest challenge is getting take-up. And it's not all to do with money. Sometimes it is, but it's not all. It's to do with confidence, and it's to do with not being afraid to go away for the year, to go away for the semester, and not be worried without the usual supports of either a university or home supports with you. And that is a very significant challenge. And that's something I think we could work a bit more closely with secondary level, which is to build the confidence in the kids. You think they're, the current generation would be extremely confident. An awful lot of them are not personally confident. So we need to do a lot of work on that. And again, I don't think it matters what discipline you're talking to. If you have confidence and if you have transferable skills and you're willing to move on, be flexible, etc., I think we have a role in a university to be a part of that, but at the end of the day, we do have a core academic role as well. And that's where the tension is, I guess, in terms of what it is we should be doing. So there would be my main 3 points in response to that.
Thanks, Eamon, for that mixed reaction there. Colin, you want to come in? Did you?
Yeah.
Barbara coming in.
I suppose I should really set the tone from where I'm coming from. I'm a CEO of a spin-out company from NUI Galway. We set up in May 2010. Yeah, I'm ex-CEO of a small spin-out company which spun out of NUI Galway in 2010. And we were mainly funded by EU funding and various other support funding. We had about between 60 and 21 employees, full-time or part-time, and we recruited from science and engineering. So there was around 50-50 split in sciences, maybe chemistry, biology, and also then in engineering, material scientists. Yes. And all of the people we employed had either degrees or higher. So we were employing people with BScs and BHs. About 20% of the staff had PhDs. We were in the fortunate and unfortunate position that we had we used a lot of secondments from EU projects. So people were given to us or sent to us. We didn't have a choice in what we got. We all, nearly all of the people that we got, we were very happy with, and we could work with them. We had, coming from across the EU, from UK, EU, and Middle East. We had 3 from Israel, for example. We had 15 to 20% of the staff were Chinese, mainly because it was difficult to get Irish staff. Not to be selected, but not many people applied for a position. So, and we also, obviously at the time, we were recruiting from JobBridge, and that's where we picked up the Irish graduates in JobBridge schemes. So in the JobBridge, we were using those people to work in more administrative and design, marketing. So we recruited from business, from arts and design courses, and from law. And across the board, we get all great people. And as Minister Quinn says, there's a weakness in the system. It's not defective, but certainly there are weaknesses. That's what we found, that just a list of items that have come to mind. Resourcefulness was one of the key things, and that was linked into problem solving and approach to problem solving. People didn't really know how to approach a problem and try and solve it. The obvious thing to do was to go and ask somebody, but that wasn't so much a collaborative goal either. So there was a communication issue as well. People didn't work together on a problem. They wouldn't. Now, I should point out that the Israeli colleagues were very good at collaborative work. They would, in fact, I always try to have, if I had 2 of them, I'd work them together, because they were more, they get together and produce what 3 people produce on their own, probably different, but I suppose the people coming from the typical educational background would try and solve the problem on their own, but didn't know how. Creativity was an issue. I mean, these were all, and you'll hear it all the time about innovation, but when I look at innovation, I go backwards and say, well, we need to be resourceful, flexible, and multi-skilled. That was an issue that cropped up. So when I spoke earlier about the problems I had, it was flexibility at PhD level. People, I think they were traumatized, actually. I think they came through the system and they were in it so long that they just didn't want to be told how to retrain, or even to learn that they had to retrain again. They just had been branded off with it, and they didn't want to listen. that's what I think. I know well, anecdotally, that there's a lot of companies in the medtech sector who are choosing masters over PhDs because they prefer maybe well, they think or believe that they're easier to mould into their needs. So I think certainly there are issues there with generic learning, and as I say, there are weaknesses, but not complete disasters. And I was surprised when I went researching this for this, that it actually, I thought it might be more third level issues, but maybe it goes beyond that. Maybe it goes back to, even 7-year-olds, as we were talking there at the break. It goes beyond that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Colin, for your insights from the employer's perspective. Maybe Barbara first and then Alan. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I think when we look across the European perspective, we see that I think the Irish education and training system is failing young people when it comes to foreign language learning. Last month, the Commission published its Education and Training Monitor for 2014, and Irish people do quite well on a number of indicators, higher than average IT skills, etc. But the shocking part of it really is there's a huge gap between Ireland and almost all other member states in the area of foreign language skills. Only 9% of Irish lower secondary school students learn 2 or more foreign languages, and this compares to an EU average of 63%. In 18 member states, the figure is over 50%, and in 9 of these, over 90% of lower secondary level students learn 2 or more languages, foreign languages. So this impacts, I think, hugely on people's employability later on. It means, for example, that Tony, as Tony has said, I think at a conference himself, that Irish people are not able to sell to many markets in the language of the customer, which is fairly vital. It's okay when you're buying, but not when you're selling. It also means that, for example, many of the multinationals setting up in Ireland are actually importing people for the job opportunities that they've created. I think Google in Dublin only has 30% Irish people working for it. Louise Thielen, who was mentioned here already in PayPal, has made the point several times that you can't find Irish graduates with the languages, with the foreign languages required, and in fact that's an added cost on these multinationals because they have to bring people in, support them while they with where they're going to live, etc. It's not something they want to do, but it's something that they're forced into doing. And I think I know that Rory knows this from what I've said to him before. Foreign language teaching is very much at the bottom of the pile, I think, in the Department of Education's list of priorities. And nothing will change, I think, until that is actually taken seriously. And we even see it in the EU institutions. We can't find Irish people with the language skills to work in the EU institutions. So Ireland is losing its influence in organisations like the European Commission because they do not have the operational and high quality language skills in 3 European languages. So I just put that out there that it's a major problem and it needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Now, Alan, thanks for that, Barbara.
Just to kind of go back maybe to the second level sector, which is the sector I work in, and talking about how well prepared are our students for the workplace. I suppose as principal of a newly established school that's only open 2 years, under the GRETB. I would say, as a leader of my school, I believe my 2 students sitting up there will be very well prepared for the workplace. Why so? Because we're a pilot school for the new junior cycle, and many of the skills that are spoken of there around problem solving, collaborative work, students being flexible and multi-skilled, they're the different things that we're trying to develop with our students in our school at present. And I know previous speakers have spoken about the tension and maybe the restrictions of the system that are currently in place, whether that's around teaching to examinations, etc. And that greatly impacts on what we can do at second level with students when those types of restrictions and tensions are in place in particular schools. But I think we probably have a responsibility to do our best for those students that are under our care, and sometimes that means maybe ignoring a circular or two from the department. And I suppose sometimes I can maybe say that with a little bit of confidence that I do, because I was a former school inspector, and maybe I just take that chance. But I think the potential is there with the new junior cycle reform to develop these skills with our students. If some of that tension and restrictions of the system around teaching to the test and all of the issues that are around assessment at the moment, if they can be alleviated or removed, it will give greater freedom to teachers in schools to actually work on what is important for students, not focusing on content knowledge, which is essentially what we do at the moment. In our school, we are essentially trying to work on what we want our students to become. So what do I want these two individuals up here, what type of people do I want them to be when they leave our school? That's far easier to do when you don't have to worry about a Leaving Cert exam to prepare them for third level. So going back to what the previous speakers spoke about in previous panels, whether it was Professor Brown or Professor Nolan, around the values that we want to develop with our students are critically important as well.
Very good, thanks, Al. John, do you want to come in?
Maybe a final
Okay.
question. Hi everyone. Yeah, maybe just a final word from on this subject as an employer here locally of, in the medtech sector. We employ quite a number of engineers, science, business, technical people, and I guess I'd have to say I take the point on the language, but you know, you have to think in business terms, certainly around Europe, and when we're talking engineering, if we go to Germany, they don't want to talk in German about engineering, they'll talk in English, and you know, maybe the percentages should comparing with foreign language competence of US business people or UK business people, because I'm all languages, don't get me wrong, but it's probably a difficult one if you're in Spain. You have to be able to speak probably several languages. You know, if you're in France and Germany, you'll have to speak English. So it's almost a prerequisite. So it might be a bit hard judgment-wise there on our language skills. But in terms of communications, it's amazing. You see youngsters coming in. We take in graduates and placements during, you know, third years placements, and it's just a mix of you see all sorts of extrovert, introvert characters, and you bring them in, and it's only once they get into the work environment and they start interacting with the other people in the company, and they start developing their skills of how to communicate. And I guess probably these days with so much computer interaction rather than interpersonal interaction, maybe some of those skills have been lost, and it's only when they get the opportunity and are actually pushed into the environment where they do have to communicate that you see very quickly all of them come up. So I wouldn't really be overly worried that we're not producing students that will be able to work in the environment when they come into it. We haven't found that as a problem at all, really. So just really, I think the other side of that is the industry's engagement and the industry's responsibility to engage with the universities, with the schools. We bring kids in from secondary schools for a few days, and they work, see what happens down in the labs and with the engineers, and you know, it helps maybe form some ideas for them for the future of the career paths they might take. So yeah, I think industry has to take a responsibility as well. It's all very well pushing it back on the education system, but you know, we need industry to be more engaged and involved, to be more willing to take placements in, to help with the secondary school exposure of youngsters into industry there.
Okay.
And so,
Yeah,
a
that's
positive
fine.
note, I would say.
Yeah.
We're not doing too badly.
Thank you, John. I'll be coming back to the internships later on with a question, hopefully. Very mixed reaction there, as you can see, to the generic skills question. I'll just take one question from the audience, if there is one, before we move on to question number 2. Student.
You talked a lot about generic skills there, and is it the responsibility of schools and colleges to either teach or encourage the learning and development of these generic skills, and which skills should be prioritised versus others, like practical versus social, and that sort of area?
Anybody want to pick up on that? Which skills should be prioritised? Is it the responsibility of the education establishments to teach them?
Well, I think like there was reference made to Howard Gardner and the multiple intelligences and also the work of Daniel Goleman around the same area. And like it's not about prioritising, I guess, one skill over another, but I think there's a sort of, well, there was some difference in reaction from the panel, but nevertheless there was also a lot of commonality about the idea that in the workplace and in society, and it's not just about the workplace alone, the more people are rounded in their ability to communicate, to be creative, and so on and so forth, the better for themselves and for the world they live in. And I think like one of the bits of good news really, which I suppose, I mean, I work in the primary sector, and like the primary education curriculum, which was revised back in 1999, is considerably, by any measure, an excellent curriculum. And I think it's like the discussion this morning was about a lot about transition from second to third level. I think we need to broaden this down to primary level as well, and the transition from primary to second level, and look at what's happening there, because much of what's being discussed about during the cycle at the moment is already happening for years in the primary school system.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably the best part of our education system, but it's not actually, it hasn't been given the space to be influential in terms of reform from the bottom up.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Sean. I think to deal with your question, there is a shift from teaching towards learning occurring and active learning at that, where students are engaged as co-creators of knowledge, and bearing in mind what employers and the skill set that employers want. I think that then puts the onus on higher education institutions to ensure that graduates have those skills embedded in the active learning that students pick up at second level and third level indeed. Okay, I'm going to move on to the second question, and here it is. Is there sufficient engagement with industry, employers and business in curriculum design, accreditation and evaluation? And I'll give you an example of what happens in our own institution, that of GMIT. Before lecturing staff put forward a proposal for a new programme, they have to research the demand in the marketplace. We then invite industry representatives onto the accreditation panel, where they have an equal voice in whether or not the programme gets approved. And finally, we appoint 2 external examiners to oversee the assessment process, one of which is normally from industry and business. Likewise, the NCCA engage with the employer organisations in curriculum design at second level. And if that is happening, why are we hearing concerns from the panel members in relation to the likes of generic skills and not having the attributes, particularly worrying at PhD level, that employers are seeking and looking for? So I'd like to hear the panel's views in relation to engagement in curriculum design, accreditation from a business and industry perspective.
Since I have the microphone, I'll start. I suppose there are opportunities to engage people at second level to engage with industry. In our particular school, again, just taking an example, we started a short course in the area of STEM. So our teachers have engaged with local industry. Our students do go out on visits to lots of different companies around Galway City. So the teachers there have spoken to the people in these industries. They've spoken to people in colleges, whether it be GMIT, NUI, speaking to people in Trinity, in UL, around course content, curricular content, around what not necessarily is required of the students, but the kind of activities that will develop problem-solving skills, collaborative learning skills, etc., within the teaching and learning activities that occur in those particular programs. And I think there's a great opportunity there for, under the new junior cycle, for schools to engage in that level of collaboration with their local communities, not just, say, at national level through the NCCA and employers coming in and sticking to the NCCA at national level. I think there's now the possibility for the central system to give greater autonomy to the local schools and local education bodies to engage with local communities around what students can and should learn maybe in school.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Tony, okay, thanks.
This is actually quite challenging, and you could have a whole conference on employer engagements. Part of the issues is around the structure of Irish business. Over 45% of people who are employed in the private sector are employed in companies with less than 50 employees, and a third are less than companies with 20 employees. And that's a really difficult constituency to engage with. You know, we have people who, usually through personal networks, like John and Colin, that will come to events like this, but expecting SMEs who are basically, you know, their whole concern is keeping their companies going, to engage with either third level or second level is quite challenging. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but it is challenging. You've then got about just over 400 companies who account for a third of the rest of private sector employment, and they're the names we'd all know, and everybody beats a path to their door. So structurally, it's quite challenged. Self-evidently, it should happen. It happens at all sorts of different levels. It happens nationally, and then there's organisations such as my own pay people like me to turn up at these types of events, to sit on NCCA curriculum reviews, etc., etc. But I think you need to go beyond that, and it probably is most likely to happen at a local and regional level, and we need structures to allow that to happen. That's where employers and various strands of the academic system can engage, because again, working in IBEC, I look across the system a lot, and it's an incredibly siloed system. We had some discussion about further education this morning, who really only recently have become part of people's consideration. But we should be engaging with higher education, further education, and indeed second level on a regional basis, because there aren't enough employers to go around to engage with all the different parts separately.
Okay, thanks, Tony. I'm maybe going to concentrate with the two employers and the panel first. Colin, maybe just get a word on this perspective of engagement.
For our company, in our case, we were involved. We wouldn't have engaged directly with schools or whatever, but we would be involved in the Irish Medical Devices Association, which is part of IBEC, and they would have developed a policy through our meetings on issues, and I know flexibility and skilled multi-talented or skilled people would have been an issue brought up a few times. And maybe John would probably know more.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, John.
Certainly, yeah. Aerogen, just to sort of paint a picture of what we do, we're a company. We develop medical drug delivery systems for the hospital markets and around the world. So we export to around 70 different countries. So the model we run as a business is it's all around innovation and marketing. So we outsource our manufacturing and we sell through distributors around the world. So that tends to mean with that concentration of people, we have about 100 people in the company now, about 65 here in Galway and the rest, a dozen in America and then other places. They tend to all be people that would come from a business, medical, engineering background. So it's kind of the knowledge-based enterprise, if you like. But our emphasis on engagement with third level might be higher proportionate to the number of people we employ. That's what I'm trying to give the perspective of. But certainly, I found it to be fantastic. I mean, we have programs with probably every university. We run some level of program, whether it's innovation partnership or whether it's a full program that's been maybe 3 years of research with places like Limerick and Tyndall Institute. Really first rate. I think the universities have changed hugely in the last number of years, where they are now required to engage with industry to get a lot of the funding, and so it's made it very collaborative and beneficial to both sides. And interestingly enough, having worked a lot with American companies, and sometimes it's a lot harder to engage. We have people in a previous company that were leadership all came from Stanford, so they were all out at Stanford and connected at Stanford, but trying to engage with Stanford in research was like, what you basically do is sit down with 2 groups of lawyers for a few months and negotiate, whereas I feel I can walk into GMIT or into NUIG here, into the engineering or medical groups and talk about an issue and see if there's a solution, that they've got some academic or they've got students that might work on a program. I think, again, we can be very critical. We've actually got it very interactive, and it depends on how willing the companies are, I think, often. But certainly I see it that the willingness is definitely there in terms of the education groups in the country.
Anybody else from the panel? Thanks for that, John. Okay.
Just on this point, I think there's been a huge improvement over the last number of years on the level of engagement with industry, but particularly on program design. I think an area of frustration can be around industry want us to change now. So they have a need. They come in, they meet, heads of school or discipline experts, and we can't always, a lot of people here in the education system, we often cannot turn it around as quickly as industry demands. So I think that's something we need to work on and to try to improve. And just one final example of a more recent engagement to get, I suppose, deal with the issue that you spoke about in terms of getting SMEs to engage with us. We have put together it's being led by Enterprise Ireland, but they're working with both NUI Galway and GMIT on this exact regional basis which you spoke about. And what they're trying to do is get the companies into us, the smaller organisations into us, to understand in what way we can help them. They frequently don't know. The larger companies are very familiar with engaging with universities and ITs. The smaller businesses not so. So they'd often say, well, what can you do for us? What can we do to help? So we have set this up, and we've had 2 very good engagements, and that's going to continue. So there's a lot of things happening in this space, I think.
Thanks, Eamon. Okay, like the last time, I'm just going to throw that out to the floor maybe for one question. That person at the top, yeah?
Okay, Charlie grew up in the 70s. I suppose on a farm in rural Ireland. I just a question for the panel. The question is, in reflecting on all your contributions, do you think that we're compensating to a large extent for the fact that our young people now no longer grow up as closely linked to the world of work and to the world of adults that many of us would have been used to at an earlier period?
That's an interesting perspective. Anybody want to pick up on that? Tony?
Yes.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more. And I think, we just have to look at our own kids, and I always try and resist policy by anecdote, but I think there's lots of evidence of that. And I just give a plug for a particular passion in the policy world of my own at the moment. There's actually, if any of you looked at the Department of Education website recently, there's a background document on strategy. It's called Service Delivery and Reform. And there's 33 high-level reforms set out there, each with their own layers of detail under them. But if I was to pick 2, First one is the junior cert, which has got a lot of airing today, and I hope we get an opportunity to come back to it because I think there's a little more to be said about that. The second is apprenticeships. And the Apprenticeship Council has just been established, and we've got a very narrow view of apprenticeships. They also suffer parity of esteem issues, and there's only 26 of them in the traditional craft areas. In order to bring that world of work back to young people, or raise it in their consciousness, I think this feeds into the whole debate around further education and training as well. I think apprenticeships are a potentially very powerful part of this armoury. And I'm not talking about transposing the German system into Ireland, because that quite clearly won't work. But the idea of a much broader range of apprenticeships across lots of different types of occupations, and much more significantly, apprenticeships that run from level 5 right up to and including level 10 offer huge opportunities to bring that world of work back to kids at an earlier age, because we've got a very middle-class notion of education in this country, very academic. We define education attainment in terms of how many CAO points we get, and it's very narrow, and it only rewards one type of learning.
Okay, Tony, before I actually go further with that, I'm going to stay with that particular point, because that was question number 4, so it's now become question number 3. The whole area of vocational education and the fact that it is not valued, this came up from the panel contributions at the pre-conference stage. Vocational education does not seem to be valued to the extent that it should be, and trades certainly are in that category, and apprenticeships that Tony is referring to. And he referred to the Apprenticeship Council that has recently been set up. So what can we do to restore the balance between vocational education and higher education? Or is there a need, are the boundaries becoming sufficiently blurred that vocational education is morphing into higher education? And is that the way we should actually keep it going? Now, Colin, you wanted to come in on that maybe, or was it?
Well, not quite that. Yeah, just that's an interesting question. I'll just quickly tell a story about two graduates that we had. Both had distinctions from the course. They both did the same course, and I got one in, and it was so good that I said, "Well, find another one," and we got another one, and so they have the same backgrounds, Gordon himself, farming backgrounds, and almost, there was no difference except one was really interested and one was not interested, and they're really nice guys. I couldn't figure out the difference. One, and this ties into Emer's research, which we all laughed about earlier. One spoke continuously about his dad. He was always working with his dad, and the other guy spoke continuously about his mother. And she's collecting him, and she, this and that. And I was kind of interested with your statistics there this morning, where 25% of students decide on their higher education future based on what their mother has said or told them. Now, I'm not saying that mothers are wrong or anything like that. The interesting thing for me, I think, is that maybe these students spend a lot more time in the room under the watchful eye of their mother, whereas some of the students go out and work with their dad on whatever, repairing tractors or doing some woodwork or whatever, and they get this influence and training from at home, and maybe that's an area that should be looked at as well.
Okay.
Maybe I'm not quite sure how you'd address that, but I know that a lot of mothers obviously, and I know.
Come to the whole.
Thanks, Colin. Really, I suppose the difficulty I feel that coming back on what Tony started in relation to apprenticeships, I think the difficulty with trying to expand apprenticeships into a broader higher education base, going right up to PhD level, is that it has a culture and an identity at the moment that's going to be very hard to break. And you know, if you say you're doing a doctorate as an apprenticeship, I think that's going to be a hard sell. So you know, how do we get over that cultural identity with the phrase and term apprenticeship?
Well, the concept of an industrial PhD is in Denmark is quite taken for granted. So, I mean, not disagreeing with you around the culture. I was actually on the apprenticeship review group, and I argued, which kind of in turn led to the recommendation of the Apprenticeship Council. I suggested that we abandon the word apprenticeship, and I lost that debate. Other people around the table said, well, look, for people who do apprenticeships, they do have high currency. But we came up with what I would think is a reasonable compromise, in that apprenticeships would be defined in terms of the relationship with the employer, but for the sectors to which they are applied, they can be branded as, as they might be. In other words, I have been pushing for the idea of a professional traineeship. So if that's appropriate to the particular occupation, so be it. A couple of days ago, we launched in IBEC what is very much like an apprenticeship, a thing called an associate ICT professional, which is a level 5, level 6 qualification. It is an apprenticeship to all intents and purposes. So this is about marketing and branding. But it's also about higher education sort of buying into this idea of advanced apprenticeships. And last week, in the UK, they launched degree apprenticeships. And one of the people on the group, on the apprenticeship review, was a lady called Hilary Steedman from LSE. And they've done loads of things really badly in the UK around apprenticeships. But she said where they work, and she gave the example in the engineering area, where the earn and learn model is now challenging the traditional university engineering degree, where fees are sort of £9,000 sterling. And they are finding that more and more people are coming in through that route. So it's not impossible.
Okay, thanks, Tony.
I'd certainly, just from a personal perspective there, I was a child of the 70s as well in, as you can tell from the accent, rural London. Rather than on the farm, I spent my summers on the building sites. But no, I left school at 16 and trained as an apprenticeship through draftsman on drawing boards with ink and vellum before CAD systems. Yeah, so I've never regretted it at all. The learning through industry was fantastic. I got sent then through night school to do my engineering in ONC and then a HND. And then later in life I did through distant learning an MBA. But certainly the experiences gained on from working on the factory floor up through industry is it's hard to really put a high enough valuation on that. And I've often seen when we've some of the best engineers we've hired over the years have been engineers that maybe their parents were, or the father was a mechanic, or the kids liked working on cars or bikes or something like that, and developed practical technical skills and then complemented them further with education. So I'd be whatever. I'd like the idea of calling it, maybe changing the name from an apprenticeship into a sort of another route to a degree. But I think it is a real path for a lot of youngsters, and I would encourage it. And I would say not only to get through degree level, but a lot of the girls and guys in my company I've encouraged to go and do, if they have primary degrees, to do a master's then, whether it's in biomedical science or biomedical engineering or an MBA, and they can do that through the university in the evenings and at weekends. I think that's a great pathway forward. You know, they can apply the knowledge that they're gaining as a young engineer, and they're far more successful then when they go in and do a master's. And the colleges here, as Emma talked about it earlier, trying to adapt quick enough. I mean, again, I would say, you know, we probably don't rate ourselves highly enough here, but I mean, if you look at Galway and see the courses that are run now around bioinnovation, biomedical science, biomedical engineering, and truly the university, and again, and GMIT as well, gearing itself towards putting out graduates in those areas for the hub and the cluster that is here in the west of Ireland. I mean, I think we've done a tremendous job.
Okay.
So again, I think we're doing the right things. I think if there is more of a structure put on this continual education from a government level, I think the colleges, universities, and employers will all work towards making that a success.
Very good. Thanks for that, John. Are panel members okay? Everybody else okay? I'm just going to throw it out for one last round to the audience if anybody has a last question. Sir. Yes?
Yeah, it's just, I suppose in the current context of the conversation that we're having, I think it's very sort of industry benefits as much as anybody else in terms of getting people ready for work. And we were talking a lot about collaboration and things like that. I'm just wondering what reforms do you think industry could make themselves in terms of how they provide for graduates coming into the workplace, or how they improve work learning skills. So like the reforms that industry can make. I know we were talking about the difficulties faced by SMEs in terms of the fact that they're smaller and they have the capacity, but is there something that can be done there to allow them to be able to contribute more?
Yeah, it's one for...
I suppose I better answer this one. And I'd slightly disagree with the question itself, or the assumptions underlying the question. I mean, you've got to step back, and this came, just to drag it back to apprenticeships, this came to me fairly clearly last year when I went round to companies and I said, what would get you to the table in terms of apprenticeships? What would interest you? And three themes emerged from those sort of consultations. One, they have to have a genuine skills need. It doesn't matter what supports are in place, what government supports, how good the education and training system is working. Unless they have a skills requirement, they're not going to engage, because that's not what they exist for. I mean, you get a certain number of companies who take a broader view, have a sense of CSR, etc., but they are not solid reasons for employers engaging on a systematic basis. The second factor was genuine influence on the curriculum, and I think we've heard already good examples of where that's working. And the third is around support from the state in terms of provision of education and training. So all three have to be in place, but the most important is the skills requirements. We would try and encourage companies, and the much maligned JobBridge internship system, which I think actually delivered some great results for individuals. Engaging with that kind of activity is what they need to do, but we've got to never forget why businesses exist in the first place.
Okay, we're at the end. Maybe you just got in on time about...
Just make a comment on Tony's. I think it's ironic that 40 years ago, the BEC sector had the apprenticeship under its remit. And 40 years later, with the onset of ANCO, it was stripped from the sector. And 40 years later, we have Solus bringing it back in under the sector. In the process, I think education was forgotten about in that transformation or transition period. I think it's important, now that it's back in under the ETBs, that the education remit plus the training remit will be properly merged, and that the funding required to carry out these remits is put in place. Currently there's no capital funding, and the structures need an overhaul. And I agree with Tony, we're going to get one chance at this, and we better move quickly to get it right.
I'll take that as a comment, so thank you very much for that. Right, we've seen generic skills where we have come to the conclusion that there's more work to be done in that space. We're making reasonably good progress in relation to employer engagement, and we have to recognise the difficulties that it poses for employers to engage with education, that they have a business to run. And I think we've had a very interesting wrap-up in the last question in relation to apprenticeship and the possible need to rebrand it as professional traineeship, and that a new approach is definitely welcome for all the stakeholders involved. So with that, I'd like to thank the panel and yourselves for your engagement in this session.